Academics strive tirelessly to explain the world around us in a categorical manner. In some instances, the task is a little easier. Chemists study distinct molecules. Physicists study predictable actions and reactions. But what about the study of people? Is it possible to think about societies and cultures empirically? Eric Wolf thought so, but he also thought we might all be going about it the wrong way. This is the story of a CUNY graduate who became a MacArthur Fellow and his quest to reimagine the field of anthropology. Eric Wolf, the Lehman College and CUNY Graduate Center professor and graduate of Queens College, was a bit of a rock star in the anthropological community, or he was, at least, to the throngs of leftist students from around the country and world who flocked to his courses, attracted by his particular application of Marxist ideas to the study of anthropology. But Eric himself, who intentionally used the term Marxian rather than Marxist in his writing, was less interested in Marxism as a political project and more as a way of explaining how human relationships and social labor might drive the development of societies and cultures. The diversity and interaction of societies was a lifelong source of fascination for Eric, beginning with the stories he would hear about his own family history. His parents had met in Siberia, where his father, an Austrian, had been sent as a prisoner of war in World War I, and his maternal grandfather, a Russian, had been forcefully resettled after a brief self-exile in France. Eric himself grew up among the ethnic and class diversity of Vienna, where he was born in 1923, and in the Sudetenland, a German-Czech border region where his father had been sent to run a factory 10 years later. But it wasn't just this mixing of cultures that impressed upon Eric. His own Jewish identity amidst the rising anti-Semitism of Europe made him keenly aware of the often life or death stakes in how people see themselves and one another. In 1938, on the eve of Nazi Germany's takeover of the Sudetenland, Eric was sent to England, followed by the rest of his family soon after. But escaping the Nazis didn't get rid of Eric's label as other. In 1940, he was incarcerated in a British detention camp for enemy aliens, a group that consisted of a few Nazis and a whole lot of the Europeans who had fled them. Out of this crucible of an adolescence, Eric was able to leave England for the United States in 1940, where his family settled in Jackson Heights, New York, and where Eric promptly enrolled in the tuition-free Queens College. His experiences in Europe had him asking some of life's big questions, and he initially looked to biochemistry in the hope of finding some answers. There was just one problem. "I got terribly bored with it," Eric said in a 1987 interview. "My experiments were always coming out wrong." Now at a loss for what to study, Eric dabbled in political science and economics before coming across an anthropology course about Asia. The course topics range from the caste system of India to the history of Chinese writing, and Eric realized that anthropology was a discipline that could tackle everything he was truly interested in about the human experience. But a degree would have to wait. World War II came to America, and Eric deferred his education for 3 years to fight with the U.S. Army in the Italian Alps. He was back in Europe again, facing an old enemy. The experience affected him deeply and stirred him out of any remaining academic listlessness. "It allowed me to put some things in perspective," he told the American ethnologist in 1987. "People came back from the war with an enormous sense that there was a new world and that you could still possibly do something new and more hopeful." Driven by this new feeling of possibility, Eric finished his studies at Queens College and graduated with a degree in anthropology in 1946. Under the GI Bill, Eric was able to enroll in a graduate program at Columbia University. Columbia's anthropology department had been founded by Franz Boas, a scientist often called the father of American anthropology, and it had become the preeminent department in the country. Boas popularized the concepts of cultural relativism and historical particularism, ideas that emphasized each society's unique past and rejected the notion that there was any shared path in how they evolved. But when Eric arrived, he and a like-minded group of left-leaning students became much more interested in how larger social forces might affect and connect different societies. They felt that Marxist theories regarding how human beings work, produce, and relate to one another could offer some insight. Together, a number of them formed a group that they called the Mondial Upheaval Society, where they could exchange ideas. We were veterans, and therefore slightly different and somewhat standoffish towards the rest of the student population, Eric later explained, and we all had some kind of socialist sympathies, and I think we saw anthropology and that kind of socialist concern as having some connection with each other. Eric received his doctorate in 1951, and over the next 20 years, taught anthropology in a number of different schools. During this time, he also took several research trips to Mexico, culminating in his 1959 book, Sons of the Shaking Earth, where, using Mexico as an example, he began to lay out his view of societies as dynamic, responsive systems that would change and reorganize internally over time. In 1971, Eric Wolf became a distinguished professor at Lehman College and the CUNY Graduate Center. It was at CUNY where Eric's views on anthropology came together in his most well-known book, Europe and the People Without History. In it, he laid out his criticism of the idea that societies could be studied as isolated entities, whose true nature would be discerned by looking for some original, untouched state. Instead, Eric argued that all societies are interconnected, in a constant state of interaction and internal reorganization, and that these processes must be the focus of anthropology. It was in the study of these processes where Eric believed Marxism could be utilized. Different systems of production, such as capitalism or feudalism, would produce groups and classes that would align or compete with one another in response to their regional or historical circumstances. These were the so-called people without history, colonized peoples, peasants, laborers whose contributions to history had long been ignored, but were just as important as the actions of the powerful. Eric's take on the dynamic nature of cultures and his provocative use of Marx to analyze that dynamism turned a lot of heads and made him a household name in anthropological circles, and his assertion of the historical agency of colonized peoples resonated greatly with the students who came from many of those same parts of the world. In 1990, Eric Wolf was awarded the MacArthur Fellowship. With the money from the award, he retired from CUNY in 1992 and turned his focus to a new project, one that would link together all of his professional and personal experience, the study of power. In his final book, Envisioning Power, Ideologies of Dominance and Crisis, published in 1999, Eric attempted to explain how power, culture, and ideas relate to one another. To do so, he compared three different societies: the Kwakiutl of the Pacific Northwest, the Aztecs of Mexico, and the Nazi regime of Germany. In each case, Eric identified a state of increasing stress that led to extreme ideologies. These ideologies, which concerned cosmic ideas of order and truth, were formed out of cultural elements familiar to each society, but ultimately served to maintain and justify their respective systems of power and production. With his last work, Eric Wolf incorporated the cultural dynamism he had studied throughout the colonial world, the modes of production he adapted from Marx, and his own visceral experience facing Nazi terror as a youth, to offer a grand theory of how culture and power relate. In a passage from his final book, Eric Wolf offered this warning. He wrote, "If culture was conceived originally as an entity with fixed boundaries marking off insiders against outsiders, we need to ask who set these borders and who now guards the ramparts." Eric's lifelong quest was to better understand humanity, and in that quest, he helped all of us to see across those borders a bit more clearly.